I've heard it said many times, and I'm sure you have as well, that you have faith and I have reason. I don't need to have faith to find a purpose in my life, and I have reason to work things out. I have a brain, and I'm not just going to go on emotionalism like you are. Someone has said that to me as I've sort of shared the gospel with them. And I said, well, but hang on, I have reason as well. In fact, I believe my reason has far more grounding than your reason. And the Bible teachers or the Bible writers have none of the concept of saying, remove your mind and just have faith. They don't want you to do this. They would say, no, you have a defensible faith. You have reason to believe that what you believe is right. Peter says this in 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts honour Christ, the Lord is holy, always being prepared to make a defence. The Greek word apologia, that's where we get apologetics from. Always be ready to make a defence to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. What he's saying is, you have a defensible position. Don't just simply say, well, I remove my mind, I have faith, but I cannot defend my position. It's not defensible. It's not reasonable. And he says, no, it is reasonable. It's very defensible, and you've got to be prepared and ready in every and all circumstances to give a defense of the hope that is in you. And notice it's the hope and not the faith that is in you. The hope seems to, and I'm just using this as a bit of an introduction to the whole concept of apologetics before we actually get into our title and message tonight. But it's a hope. Why is it a hope and not necessarily a faith? Because when someone sees you operating in faith, you are showing that you have a hope beyond the current circumstances. They look at the circumstances that you're living in, like the ones that the recipients of 1 Peter were living in, that was primarily persecution and hardship, and people look at these people and say, what is that hope that you have? And give me a defense of it. Give me a reason for it. Don't just say, well, this is something that was handed down by my parents to me, and look, to be honest, I don't really know why I believe it, but it seems to ground me, I guess. That sort of person is not fixed on a firm foundation. And so Peter's saying, no, you do have a defensible position, and be ready to defend your position. When I was in the process of coming to Christ, it was this concept of, is faith defensible? Is it reasonable? That actually took me as one of the aspects of confirming that, no, it is reasonable. At the age of 20, I started to question my life and the direction of it. And then I started to ask Dad questions. Look, Dad, I don't know how, explain to me why there are only kangaroos in Australia and not the rest of the world, when supposedly the Noah's Ark was grounded on Mount Ararat, way over there, and why is it just that there's kangaroos here? Questions like this, there's got to be a reason for that. There's got to be a reasonable answer. It's not just simply, look, that's what the Bible says, that's just what happens. So I was asking Dad all these questions, sort of trying to refute him, but trying to, at the same time, hear his defense to ground me. And that was really significant in bringing me to Christ. Obviously, the gospel and understanding Christ has dealt with my sin, but understanding that my faith, or the faith that I'm potentially going to place my life in, is reasonable. It's not just I've devoided my mind from my heart. I was reading an article this week from a lady apologist, and the article was this: the number one sign your kids are just borrowing your faith and not developing their own. The number one sign to tell that your kids are just borrowing their faith or your faith. And I was interested to read the actual title. Really took me, and I thought, well, are my children just borrowing my faith? Will they just borrow my faith? Because that's not going to be steady and firm, I wouldn't think. And she writes this. Actually, she grew up in a Christian home. She picked up a book when she was a little bit older, when she came out of high school and then into college, and it was about New Age spirituality. And she read this and thought, this is amazing. She writes, "My faith was so shallow that the first exciting philosophy I encountered after high school swept me off my feet, without so much as an inkling that it was in conflict with anything I had been taught. Without that deeper engagement, my faith simply remained shallow and was based on living out a copy of what those were doing around me." That was her parents. Haven't we all met people like this? Potentially your children could have followed that same path. And so the question was, not the question as it was, the evidence that your children are only borrowing your faith, she came up with this, that they rarely, if ever, ask questions regarding the faith they believe. They never question it. She puts it down to either they're uninterested, meaning that, look, this is just, uninterested. I go to church. That's a good sign that they're borrowing your faith. Potentially, they just don't see it as important. Maths, English, church on Sunday, no need to ask questions of that. It really doesn't interest me, so I'm not going to ask questions about it. Another one was their faith has not been challenged. So they're just in a fishbowl of Christianity, come to church, get homeschooled, go to a Christian school, whatever it is. So not tested, therefore no questions, just simply accept it and we just go on. Perhaps they're scared of your reaction. Oh no, what if mum and dad think I'm not tracking with them? I don't really want to ask them questions. Perhaps that's the reason. And maybe they're getting the answers elsewhere and therefore they're not going to ask you questions. So this, just as an introduction into what we're trying to do here, we're wanting to say that there is a good reason to ground our faith. And we as parents need to be asking the questions of our children and seeing, are they firm in the same faith that I have? And then by our asking questions will no doubt result in them asking questions. So that is just a little introduction, that something that's certainly on Pastor Andrew's and my heart as we come here and talk about these things. So what's the question tonight? Is there meaning to life? Or can our lives have significance without God? That's what I'm trying to grapple with tonight. Can our lives have significance without God? Is there any meaning to life? Friedrich Nietzsche, philosopher, he said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." He who has a why that's grounded can bear almost any how that's going to come in life. And I'm proposing that our lives do have significance precisely because there is a God. Put in the negative, our lives do not have significance as if there is no God. Our lives do not have purpose, our lives do not have significance if there is ultimately no God. Why do I believe that? Because, and Pastor Andrew has shared this in previous lessons, that there is objective truth that we can ground our faith on. And Andrew mentioned that certainly in our first lesson of who is God and can we believe him. And there, to have objective value will give us purpose and meaning. There is no reality outside objective grounded value. Let me read Bertrand Russell, and this is certainly one man who a lot of apologists will state, but he was a philosopher in the 20th century, and really he was an atheist and showed the ramifications if there is no God. And he says this, let me read it to you. That man is the product of causes which has no provision of the end they were achieving. So it's just simply man's the product of a causes and there's no means to any end. There's no purpose. That his origin, his growth, his hopes and fears, his loves and his beliefs are but the outcome of accidental collocations of atoms. That no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve an individual life beyond the grave. that all the labours of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system, and that the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. All these things, if not quite beyond dispute, are yet so nearly certain that no philosophy which rejects them can hope to stand. Only within the scaffolding of these truths, only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair, can the soul's habitation henceforth be safely built. That's a despairing thought. What he's saying is that science is clear, that the world is running out of steam, that the solar system is ever expanding, that the sun is cooling, that the universe's energy is decreasing. All you need to give it is time, and you have nothing. The earth will be vanished if there is no God. The earth will go because there will be no sun. All we'll have in the end is complete darkness and silence and the corpses of stars and planets that are no more. And he said he's honest. This is an honest philosopher stating this is the reality of no God. There is no hope except corpses of dead stars. And he said that's what we build our lives upon. See, philosophers going back, say, 50 to 100 years were quite honest. They understood that's the reality. Atheistic belief, no God, no future, no hope, no purpose. Unfortunately, the philosophers and psychiatrists of today seek to bring meaning into life even without God. And one of those, you probably know him well, Jordan Peterson, if you've looked at some of his YouTube clips. He states in response to Bertrand Russell, he says that is straight from Satan. I mean, not bad for a guy who doesn't even believe in God, doesn't believe in Satan. But yes, we balk at such a concept that to think that if there is no God, then does anything matter? All you give it is time and there's just nothingness. And so he would try and feed back into an atheistic worldview, meaning there is no meaning. But Richard Dawkins is reasonable of the God delusion. He says, in a materialistic universe, there is at the bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pointless indifference. And that leaves us with little hope. So let's say there is no God. Can we invent meaning without God? Can we invent meaning without God? So we've just removed God. Can we invent meaning? First of all, we're going to have to ask ourselves, whose meaning is ultimately right? So if I'm going to try and invent meaning without God, what am I going to base it on if I do not have objective truth? I don't have anything to base this on. So is there meaning, whose meaning will ultimately be right? And you might say, well, it doesn't... So the question is, who is to say that your meaning is right and my meaning is wrong? So if we're going to take a meaning not based on objective truth, we're going to have to build meaning back in to our lives. And I might say, well, my meaning's right. You might say that your meaning is right. And the problem is, and you've heard this said, look, parents unfortunately have said this of their children, as long as their children are happy, as long as they're finding purpose in life. Well, the problem with that is that person A's purpose and meaning for life will be only as good as it doesn't clash with person B or C or D's meaning and purpose for life. So say, for instance, person A desires to make a green and better world. They've not thought through the ramifications of, there's no point in that because ultimately the world's going to be no more in a certain time, but nevertheless, so they try and reduce their carbon footprint. They're growing vegetables, they're riding bicycles, Who knows? They're doing all these things. They're recycling. They're not putting the heater on. They're trying to reduce their carbon footprint because they want to save the planet. They want to do good by the planet. Meanwhile, the neighbour next door couldn't care less. So their meaning is to reduce carbon. This guy's meaning is actually, you know what, I think carbon's really good for the environment. You know, it just flourishes everything. So I'm just going to pump out the gas. My heater's up. My air conditioner's on. I prefer to walk around, you know, just in my boxer shorts in 0 degree outside. That's fine. So do you see there's going to be a clash when the two meanings come together? And you say, well, so ultimately it would seem to be, unless there is objective truth, as an example, at some stage there's going to have to be a clash. And I guess that clash will ultimately be the fallout of evolution, because we have to say, well, ultimately, it doesn't really matter because it is survival of the fittest. That is how we get better. So maybe whoever's got the bigger gun will ultimately win. And so, you know, we're just running out our evolutionary values. So, no, whose meaning is going to be ultimately right? That's the question, if there is no God. If we're going to have to try and feed back meaning into our life. Second point would be, who determines meaning? So who's going to now determine, well, this is the real meaning we should live by. This is what we are designed to do. If we are here because of naturalistic evolutionary processes, then can we actually gain meaning with regards to this? Well, first of all, can we gain meaning outside of ourselves? So we, as Christians, and we will look at this in a moment, we can gain meaning outside of ourselves, and that is God. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But take away God, can I gain meaning outside of myself? And ultimately, as I've tried to explain, that there is no ultimate purpose in an evolutionary, atheistic world view, because you are simply a conglomerate of atoms that have come together, of cosmic sludge, as they say, that has come together, and it could have been different if somehow the chips fell the other way. Somehow evolutionary would have gone another way and you would not have been here. So can we actually get meaning outside of ourselves in an evolutionary worldview? I can't see how you possibly can. There's no possibility, because ultimately you are here by accident. You will not be here soon. So I don't believe you can get meaning outside yourself. Well, can you get it within? Can you get it within yourself? Just simply ascribing meaning as we were sort of using person A and person B. Stanley Kubrick, a film director, once put it like this: the very meaninglessness of life forces man to create his own meaning. So I'm very good at science. I want to find a cure for AIDS. Therefore, my meaning to life is to find a cure for AIDS. If I could do that, I can go to the grave having achieved something very good and very tangible. Now, but that sounds noble and very good, but the problem is, in an atheistic worldview, you really can't have that as an acceptable meaning. And two problems. The problem of arbitrariness, which is sort of random circumstances, meaning that if the meaning of life is subjectively determined, then anything could become the meaning of life. I have a meaning. My meaning is to get a cure for AIDS. This guy's meaning is to spread AIDS. If I can go to the grave by spreading AIDS, then I have done very well for myself. If I could go to the grave by eating pizza and staying at my mum's home until I'm 60 years old and do nothing, there is ultimately whose meaning is going to win. And you can't say that one's better than the other. You can't say that to value life and uphold it is better than the guy who wants to kill life. Both have their own desires, both have their own meanings. As long as you're fulfilling your meaning, then all is happy. It just doesn't work. I mean, that's not reasonable. We're not thinking reasonably here. What about the concepts And sorry, just to get back on that, and you would say, of course, that's crazy. And the problem is, when you say that's crazy, you're going to have to quickly move into the camp of there is objective meaning outside of myself, that there is value to human life. If finding a cure for AIDS is worthwhile, you are going to have to move from your position to the position on the side of there is objective meaning outside of myself, and that must be some transcendence that, and so you're not going to be true to your position. What about the bootstrap problem? And that is like, you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I can't sort of lift myself off the ground by not touching anything, right? And so what it means is that you cannot find meaning in a meaningless world. It's just simply not possible. And Cornelius Van Til captured this by saying, talking about the absurdity of this, he says, likening it to a man made of water in an infinite, bottomless ocean of water, trying to climb out of the water by building a ladder of water. You're trying to find meaning in a meaningless society, or in a meaningless world. It does not work. You have no meaning, no purpose. So how are we going to assess the meaning? Let's take an atheistic worldview very quickly, and we're going to bring these points together. Atheistic worldview, and then a Christian worldview with regards to three questions. What is our identity? What is our value? What is our purpose? If we look at it from an atheistic worldview, and I've sort of answered a lot of these, and if we look at it from a Christian worldview. So from an atheistic worldview, what is our identity? Well, Mr. Dawkins, what is our identity? He did say, we are survival machines. No, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules of DNA known as genes. You are nothing. Your identity is simply cosmic stardust, random molecules. You have no identity in yourself. You have no identity. What about value? Well, it depends how we're going to measure value. An economist is going to measure value on how much someone makes, how much they're worth. This person can make this much. They're worth that much. An employer will say, well, look, I don't care about your private life, just as long as that person, they gain their value by what they can produce, by what they can do. An environmentalist will say they gain their value by how well they look after the environment. And the end result of that will be, well, humans are not looking after the environment, and it's probably better that humans just don't exist at all, so that at least we're not going to harm the environment, because that becomes the greater thing. So ultimately, when we have this, we fall into a problem to say, when there is no God, the value becomes fluid. And it really depends on what basis you're trying to value things on. And ultimately then, what's the purpose? What's the meaning? But let's look at the purpose then. Purpose of an atheistic worldview. To be true, can there be any purpose? Can there be any purpose when there was no purpose in design? It was a random act of, let's call it nature, that we are even here. Can there be actually any purpose for me living? How am I to determine good and evil? How am I to even question you on anything? There is just no purpose. It doesn't really matter in the end. And how do we determine if that person's lived a full life? So we at their funeral say, this person lived a full life. If there's no purpose, ultimate purpose, who knows? I mean, what's a full life? So if I took my watch and I started to hammer it and smash it, and I said, this is a bad watch, and you'll say, whoa, hang on, what are you doing? It's not a bad watch. You're just not using it for the purpose it was designed for. It's designed to tell the time, not to be bashed. And that sort of comes in to what we are as human beings. If we don't know the purpose, we don't know what we're even doing, why we're even here. Unless we understand what we are designed for, we will not know what is good, what is bad, what is a good life, what is a bad life. We will not know what we're living for. And what we might say, well, as long as humans flourish, well, what about mice? What about fleas on the cat's back? Haven't they got every right to flourish as much as you do? They don't have a brain as well developed as you. Really throws things into confusion. See, Hitler was convinced that killing plenty of Jews was the best way to flourish human life. Well, we're going to just refine them down. We're going to have really good ones. Margaret Sanger there, the founder of Planned Parenthood, thought that forcing poor people to be sterilized was actually a good purpose for society, so that it flourishes the best of the best. If atheism is true, there is no legitimate reason for saying that behaving one way is worse than behaving another way. And then what happens when we die? Well, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. There's no purpose in life. It doesn't really matter if I lived a good life or a bad life. It really doesn't matter. If I help people, it doesn't matter. If I hurt people, it doesn't matter. One philosopher ended up saying, when he comes to the end of this, why not just suicide? And that is the end result of there is no God. What are you even doing? Why eat? Why do anything if it's not going to end in anything? If it's not going to matter at all? Well, I'm pleased to say that we have great purpose, we have great value, we have an identity, we have a value, and therefore we have a purpose. And because there is objective truth found in the Creator God, and therefore our lives do matter. Therefore our lives are worth living. Therefore we have a hope. Therefore we have a reason to do what we do. Therefore we can tell what is good, what is evil. Therefore we know how to love our neighbour. It totally transforms our life. Let's look at these ones. What's our identity? What's our identity as a Christian or as simply as a human being? The Bible is very clear on this, and Andrew went through why we can trust the Bible last time. So if you have not listened to that, make sure you listen to it. Genesis 1:26 and 27 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. God, before all time, put it in his heart to make, to share his love. He, as you know, he created all things. He created the heavens, the earth, the skies. He filled the streams with water, with fish, and the seas, and put animals on the land, and he made all those things. But then he saved the apex, the pinnacle of his creation for man, for a unique part of his creation, his prized creation. And he did not just simply say, let there be these things. He said, let us make. There is intentionality in the Creator God to create man. And guess what we are? We are humans. We are these ones that Jesus or that God spoke about. You are this one. You are this one. And he says, let us make. He distinguishes you from all the other animals, from everything else. You are unique. God created them both male and female. He gave them, he made the two of them. God gave them dominion. He gave them purpose. He said, rule over this. Don't let that rule over you. You rule over it and subdue it. But the most wonderful thing is he gave an identity that is in the image of God. He made you unique so that you would display his glory and his likeness, his holiness, in the narrow sense that you would be that representative of the Creator God. You have an identity. You have been given dignity. Humans have been given dignity, an identity. In a broad sense, we have a rational soul. We can think, we can discuss these things. An animal can't do that. He has made us unique. He's made us unique with that aspect, that we can communicate with him, that we can have communion with him. And we have to have dominion over the rest of his creation. Rabbi Zacharias quotes the altercation between the Pharisee and Jesus and puts a spin on it at the end. Let me explain. Remember, the Pharisee came up and said, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And Jesus wisely says, well, give me a coin, and says, well, whose image is on this? And the man said, Caesar. And Jesus says, well, give to Caesar which is Caesar's, and give to God which is God's. Now let me quote Ravi here. He says, the distinguishedness of the questioner is noticed in the fact that he did not come back with a second question. He should have said, what belongs to God? Give to God what is God? What belongs to God? And Jesus would have said, whose image is on you? Give to Caesar that which is Caesar. Give to God that which belongs to God. God's image is on you. You belong to God. You have been created unique. You've been created in the image of God to display his holiness, to display his likeness. If you are not doing that, you are not fulfilling your ultimate God-given role that you were created to be. He's given us an identity. He's also given us value. He's given us value. With that image comes value. And turn to, or pop that next one up if you could, on Matthew 5:21-22, this shows it with the law. You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable of judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable of judgment. Because you have the identity of the Creator, you have value, and Jesus states, as it's stated in the law, you shall not murder. Why? Because you are of the image of the Creator. You have value as an image bearer of Almighty God. And you think of economic theory, right? So if I have this iPhone, so there's the aspect of that we're made in the image of God, you have value. If I said to you, look, would you buy this iPhone? And we'll negotiate on price, what you're willing to pay. But if I took this, and you might be willing to pay, I don't know, $300 or something. If I went on Desert Island and we met, and there was no power, no transmission, and I said to you, will you pay me that $300? So it's worth nothing to me now. It's worth nothing to me. You only pay that which it's worth. The value is based on what you're willing to pay for it. Wasn't that sort of how God placed his value on us? God sent his own son, in that while we were yet sinners, to die for us. That shows an immense value that God has placed upon each of us. That he would leave the realms of heaven, that glory, to condescend, to die in our place, to take upon our sins, so that we would be redeemed back in relationship with him, to restore the thing that we broke. That shows an immense value. You not only have identity, you have value that Almighty God, the creator of heaven and earth, has placed upon you. And is also calling to you now, come to me and find your true value. And try and understand your true identity, and ultimately find your true purpose in life. The Westminster Confession, if we look at the Shorter Catechism, gives a summation of the purpose of man. Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. And he's taken from those verses. Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. If we understand that we are image bearers of God, that we are valuable to God, that we are valued of him, it would seem to be that the best purpose that we have is to display the image. That he has put parameters around our life, that we would live in those parameters to best display the image of God. And what's going to happen? We're going to find the joy that we find in displaying the image, which is our purpose. So living life to the full, sharing his love, his joy, his goodness, his value, virtue, and then sharing that with others. If you look at it from an atheistic perspective, you can say there is no identity. You have no identity. You have no value. You are useless. You are worthless. And therefore you have no purpose. I don't know why you would even bother living. But that's not the case. That's a lie, as Jordan Peterson in one sense would say, but not believe it himself, that is from Satan. The Bible clearly tells us, when the heaven declares the glory of God, that God is the one who created all things. He created you and I. He created us with his image, to be an image bearer, to be holy like he is holy. He placed his value upon us, representing Christ on the cross, who came to die in our stead to call us back to him, and he gave us a purpose now to live for him. And that's what he's calling each of us to do. And so you say, is there meaning for life? Absolutely there's meaning for life, meaning in life. But there's only meaning in life because God lives. Because God created everything, and in the end, God will be there, and we will be living forever. The end is not when you close your eyes in death. God exists, and our life has purpose. So may you embrace that purpose that is ultimately found in Christ today.